Welcome back, everyone. It is Andy Deyell, your Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at Canisius High School, with another episode of Conversations with Canisius, our regular web series where we check in with our alums all over the U.S. and see what they've been up to since their time here at 1180 Delaware. I am joined today from Allentown, Pennsylvania, by a very special guest from the class of 1994, Mr. Jason Anderson. Jason, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Andy. How you doing?
Great. I'm great. It's I would love to tell you it's a sunny day here in Buffalo, but it's November and you know better. So, but it's good. I just wanted to introduce Jason. Jason is currently the Senior Managing Director at Accenture, where he heads up their life sciences organization. And Jason, before we go backwards and talk about sort of how you discovered Canisius High School, tell me a little bit about Accenture and what you do there.
Sure, I'm happy to. I've actually been asked for about the last 26 years by my friends and family, what do I do at Accenture? And it's not the easiest thing to explain, but we are a global technology operations strategy consulting organization that basically does professional services for the world's biggest companies and governments. So we have about 750,000 employees all around the world. We work in every industry, and a lot of what we're doing is we're helping our clients to run their operations better, faster, cheaper, helping them to innovate in new ways, to design and develop new products, market their products. You name it, if it's in the professional services category, we're doing it. I joined them right out of college back in 1998, back when they were still called Anderson Consulting, back when they were a part of the Arthur Anderson accounting firm, which is a name that many people may be familiar with. We became an independent company in 2001. I thought I would stay for 2 or 3 years, and 26 years later, I am still here and really enjoying the work that I do. I get to work with the world's leading global pharmaceutical companies, which is really nice because I feel like everything that I do, everything my teams do, in some way contributes to the discovery, development, manufacture, marketing of products that save and improve human life. So it's been a real joy to work there and a real joy to work with my clients over that period of time.
And this, of course, was no accident for you as somebody. I believe you majored in biological engineering at Cornell, correct?
Yeah, that's right. After I graduated from Canisius, I went on to Cornell. And as you and I were talking, one of the great secrets of Cornell for New York State residents is that they have state-funded colleges as well as privately endowed colleges. What attracted me to Cornell in the first place was the ability that I could get an engineering degree, but I could actually pay in-state tuition for 3 out of 4 years. So I went to Cornell. I enrolled in their environmental and biological engineering program. My intent was to basically help clean up the world when I got out of college. I was kind of inspired by my grandfather, who was an engineer, and I discovered, maybe much to my dismay while I was in school, that maybe I didn't enjoy engineering all that much. But I stuck it out because I knew it was a really great foundation for any career. And when I graduated, people like me, engineers who had lost their way in engineering, were doing one of two things: investment banking or consulting. I didn't know what either was, so I went the consulting path and just discovered that I really loved it.
That's great. But so if you're class of 94, it means back in 1990, you're looking to select a high school. Thinking back to on your time there, I can't remember grammar school wise, where did you go?
Went to St. Andrews
St. Andrews. Okay.
in Kenmore.
And so
Yeah.
how did you hear about Canisius and what, people would think, you're in Kenmore, that's St. Joe's territory. What made you look at Canisius and what made you decide to go to Canisius High School?
Yeah, there were a couple of things. So I actually grew up in Grand Island, and when my family was looking for a good grade school, we found St. Andrew's Parish Grade School in Kenmore, which I know unfortunately has shuttered its doors over the last year.
Mhm.
But I went to my grade school years there at St. Andrews, had a wonderful time. But you're right, it's right in St. Joe's territory. And as I got ready to go to high school, there were really two schools I was looking at: St. Joe's and Canisius. Uh, my grandfather, who I mentioned earlier, actually grew up in New York City and had a Jesuit education at Xavier. So I always knew who he was rooting for from the very get-go. And then my father worked locally at Gibraltar Steel for many years, good friends with the Lipkes and others. And just in talking to him and his colleagues, he always knew that Canisius was the best high school in Western New York, and so he put maybe a little bit of a bug in my ear. But when the time came, I was leaning toward Canisius, and I visited Canisius, and I think you just know when you step through the blue doors that Canisius is different than any other place you've been in your life. It certainly, for me, had a very different feel than visiting St. Joe's, which felt like a very typical school. And when I walked into Canisius, I suddenly felt like there's this sort of really interesting mix of home that you feel when you're in the school, the sort of freedom, the environment that was there, the faculty, and I really knew after that visit that I was definitely going to Canisius. It probably helped that my grandfather and my dad were in my ear about it, but they led me in the right direction. And as you and I discussed, I think my 4 years at Canisius were probably the most important 4 years of my life in terms of shaping who I am, my worldview, and setting me up for success in the future.
And so speaking of that, who are some of the influences from on the faculty or coaching standpoint that for your time at Canisius, who are some of those teachers that really you connected with and that really shaped you going forward?
Yeah, there were so many. So I will miss some of them, and I apologize for that. But when I think back to those early years, it was people like Fran McGreevy. He was one of my teachers as a freshman. He was my advisor as a sophomore. And I just remember him being such a great mentor, and coming into the school as a 14 or 15-year-old, you're not used to having mentors like that in your life. You're used to having teachers. And I can really remember Mr. McGreevy being sort of that first person who just took us all under his wing, treated us like adults, engaged in really interesting conversation, debated topics as we went through world religions. And I still remember that to this day. So he was probably my first, best teacher that I had when I was at Canisius. I also would say people like Joe Lucenti, the dean of students, who was also there, Andy, when you were at Canisius. But I distinctly remember coming in the very first day at Canisius, sitting down in the auditorium, and hearing from Mr. Lucenti, and the theme of his entire discussion was respect. I can still hear his voice echoing in my ears about respect and how the importance of respect, and when you give respect, you get respect at a place like Canisius, and how we were going to be treated not as children anymore, but like adults from that point forward. And we just had to keep earning that right to be treated like adults and show that respect and earn that respect. And I just think he set a really nice tone. Obviously, no one ever liked meeting with Mr. Lucenti, but I really appreciated his ethos and frankly the way that we all got treated when we walked through those doors. Um, Maybe the fourth person I would highlight is Father Garaventa. So Father Garaventa, I think, was only at Canisius for a couple of years. He was my history teacher, but also just an incredible mentor, funny, made the class really interesting and entertaining. And I certainly kept in touch with Father Garaventa over the years. He married myself and my wife Anne years later. So also just a really great mentor. And then the last person who you probably hear more often than not was Father Nauman. I think in truth, I learned more in 2 years of Father Nauman's English class. I had the privilege of having him for 2 years and having him as an advisor. But I learned more in working with Father Nauman and being a student in his class than probably from any other teacher that I've had in my entire life. I think he really taught us how to think critically, how to make arguments, how to prove and disprove a point. And those are the skills I use every single day of my life now. So those are, there were many others, Ms. Turpik-Andres, Ms. Kessler, Mr. Crum. There's like the list goes on and on. But those are some of the ones that really stick out.
That's great. And so, we talked a little bit about your life after Canisius. You end up at Cornell. You at some point along the way, you're in Philadelphia area. You're at Accenture. I believe you go to graduate school at is it Wharton School of Business at UPenn?
That's right. Yep.
You meet a girl, you get married, you have a few kids. Like when you look back on that whole sort of journey since Canisius, what are some of the takeaways from you? What are the things that you learned at Canisius that you've taken away and used in your everyday life, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, I think that the first thing, maybe to tie in a little bit to the point on Father Nauman, as well as some of the activities that I was involved in, is the ability to think critically, to reason, to argue, to persuade.
Yeah.
So, while I was at Canisius, I was involved in a lot of different activities. I was I was on the yearbook staff, managing editor, Big Brothers, a retreat leader, National Honor Society. But the two activities that I probably spent most of my time on were drama, being in the plays and musicals, and then within the speech and debate team. Both of those, combined with what I learned from Father Nauman, are probably the skills that I use every single day. My role right now within Accenture, and frankly, even just my role as a parent, a lot of that just involves understanding the interests of the people that I'm working with, building trust, and then convincing, coming up with a cogent argument that makes a client want to work with us instead of someone else, or that gets my kids to do something that they don't want to do. And the skills that I learned in order to create those arguments, to think critically about a situation, to be able to explain in plain kitchen English, what it is that I would like someone to do, or my point of view. These were all the skills that I learned in some way within the classroom at Canisius and within the extracurricular activities that I did. And so even to this day, I will find myself coaching teams or talking to a client and sort of drawing upon these lessons of, okay, what's the thesis? What are we actually trying to prove here? Why are we here in the first place having this conversation? Okay, and if we can establish that, like, what are the facts that would convince me that the point of view that you have is the right point of view, and digging into that. And when I do that with my teams, what I realize I'm doing is I'm doing exactly the same exercise that I used to do with Father Nauman when we'd write our thesi at the end of reading Shakespeare or Beowulf or the Odyssey or whatever it was we were reading. And the skills that I practice when I'm standing in front of a room of clients and executives is exactly the same skills that I was practicing back when I was in speech and debate and standing in front of rooms of people and putting myself out there. So yeah, after 6 years of post-secondary education at Cornell and at Penn, I can honestly say the most valuable thing I learned at Canisius, and it's these kinds of skills that I use literally every day.
It's great. It's great to hear. And your dad, you have two kids rapidly approaching high school age, right? And one of the things we ask our alums in these interviews is for some advice that they would give to our kids that are just about to hit college or just about to start their time in the working world. When you look back, if you could give your younger self some advice, what are two or three pieces of advice you would give to a young person today as they're just starting their professional lives?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. One is that there's no shortcuts in life for anything.
Right.
And like, for example, there's all this talk right now about generative AI and what can generative AI do for you. And I don't live in the academic world anymore, but I know within academia, there's a lot of angst about how tools like generative AI can be used to create shortcuts around the real work. And and like what I can honestly say is if I hadn't put in the really hard yards at Canisius and beyond learning my craft, I would not be as successful in life as I am today, right? And so I think that there are a lot of these shortcuts out there in life that exist. And sometimes they feel really good it's the easy button, it's the easy way to get through something. But as I look back on, 26 years of my career and even before that, I can say that all of the hard work that I did not taking advantage of those shortcuts makes my life so much easier right now. So the first would be just not taking the shortcuts, putting in the hard work, because that's building skill in yourself that you're going to be able to cash in on forever. The second piece of advice I would have, especially for young folks that are currently in high school or are starting out their careers, is to live below your means.
Hmm.
I think especially I found myself coming out of college for the first time ever, with actual money of my own to spend, frankly, making more money than I thought I should be making. And yet I couldn't make ends meet. I couldn't pay my rent, my car bill, my student loan payment, my going out to dinner,
Right.
all of those things. And living in that kind of a situation creates massive stress on your life. And it takes away the oxygen for you to focus on other things. And I made a conscious decision, maybe a couple years after I graduated that I would never be in a position like that again. I was always going to live below my means. And what that has done for the rest of my life is take a certain amount of pressure off of my day to day, which I've appreciated. And I feel like a lot of people don't learn that lesson until maybe very, very late in life. So live below your means, do without the things, drive your car for 10 years, and get the 1 bedroom apartment instead of the 3 bedroom apartment, or the 2 bedroom house instead of the 5 bedroom house. You'll never regret making those decisions in the long term. And then the third piece of advice that I've sort of self-reflected on for myself more recently is I think everyone out there as a young alum or someone graduating or in college or starting your career out, um, you're all amazing at what you do, right? You're awesome at so many things. And I think that when you get out into the world, so much of the world tries to convince you that you're not very good at things, right? You get your first job and you're the low person on the totem pole, and you're being told you don't have the experience to do A, B, and C. And I feel like the post school world, post college world tends to often take a lot of the oxygen out of the room in terms of like what your worth is, what you're good at, how you have to, kind of, and everybody needs to learn the ropes, everybody needs to put the time in. But I think in all of that, don't forget how amazing you are at things, right? The students at Canisius right now know more about technology or any number of topics than I do, right? Than old people like me. And so I would just say never forget that. Never be afraid to raise your voice to make your opinion heard. Never hesitate on that because you think you don't know as much as the next person, you're not as experienced as the next person, because chances are your opinion is more informed. It may be more relevant than all of the folks that kind of think they know it all. So, and again, I feel like that was a lesson that I learned at Canisius as well, is like your opinion matters. Don't be silent, take yourself off mute and make your opinion known. Add to the conversation. Don't be a passenger, but be in the driver's seat. I think if students can maybe find a way to do a few of those things, I think they'll do better than I did. That's for sure.
That's great. That's great advice. And not something you hear a lot. Usually when I talk to people, they're talking more about, listen. And I think you're right, though. I think there's our kids today, they know more about so many things than we do. And we sometimes shut them down instead of letting them breathe and let them talk about the things that they do know about and the things that they can help us to know about. So that's great advice, not only for an academic, but for a parent, for anyone in the business world. So thank you for that. What about personally, Jason? What do you, as you look towards the future, what are some of your personal and professional goals in the near and longer term. You know, you're a young guy, you got a lot of juice left, but as you think about not only work but personal life, like what do you hope to accomplish over the next couple decades?
That is a good question. I feel like I've made my entire career anyway by doing things that I didn't expect to do. So I expect to do a lot more of the unexpected. You know, over the course of 26 years, I've been a strategist, I've been a technologist, I've run large operational functions, I've been a salesperson. Today I run some of our largest global accounts within Accenture, within the life sciences business. I get to travel globally. I get to meet a lot of teams, people working for me and for my clients all around the world. Every single one of these experiences was totally different than the experience before it. And so in some ways, I try not to professionally plan too much for the future because I think the right opportunity for me is probably something that comes into focus sometimes versus something that I can set a 5-year vision on. Professionally right now, I love what I do. I get to wake up every day, spending time with my clients, solving their biggest problems, leading global teams, traveling the world. As we were saying, I spent last week in Mumbai in India, working with my client's chief marketing officer, their president, as well as a host of Accenture leaders who work for me in that geography. I'm home for a week here with my daughter's play is tonight, so I'll get to see that before I get on a plane tomorrow and go to Singapore and Shanghai and Tokyo next week. So to some extent, like everything, what I'm doing right now for me is a dream. I try not to think too hard about how I want to leave what I'm doing now to do something different. What I will say is, I'm in my late 40s now, and I've been doing this for 26 years. And at some point, I don't know, in the next 5 or 10 years, I will probably retire from what I'm doing now and do something else. Maybe something that feels like more of a passion project. I would love to teach, honestly. I would. So I don't know. Maybe if I move back to Buffalo, you'll see me around the halls of Canisius. I would
I can
love
put in a good
that.
word for you, that's for sure.
So yeah, I will call you up. I'll send you my resume. But I would really love to teach. I love being a mentor to folks that work for me, at people at all levels, and I have the privilege of mentoring people who are right out of school all the way up to very senior managing directors within our company. And so I think I'd really love teaching. So if I do something else, that's what it'll be next. And then just on the personal front, like as a parent, I have a 16-year-old son and an almost 14-year-old daughter. As we've talked about before, it's a lot.
Sure.
And so like right now, my goal is to get them to the next phase of their lives, get them into college. My son, as we talked about, my son has Down syndrome. And so parenting a child with a disability like my son Teddy, it's a different path for you as a parent. And so he is a junior in high school right now. He's doing very, very well. He plays the cello. He acts in the plays and musicals. He dances. He will go on to, we hope, a post-secondary program at one of the local colleges, a life skills program. So now we're in the mode of, okay, where's he going to go? What's it going to be like to have him living away from home? And then my daughter just getting her ready for high school and God knows what beyond. The sky's the limit for her. So and I think wherever they want to end up is where we'll end up. So who knows? Maybe my daughter Lily will decide to move to Buffalo and we'll be back there and I'll be teaching at Canisius in 5 or 6 years.
Well, that I'd sign up for that. But I want to thank you for just your insights and your really thoughtful responses. These interviews that we do, they're really not about what the person does for a living, that we're talking to. It's really about the lessons they've learned and the wisdom they've acquired sort of during life. And you've shared some really, really wonderful insights with us today. So thank you for that. And I appreciate you spending some time with us. I know you're very busy. I hope to see you either in Allentown or in Buffalo sometime soon. But thank you for spending some moments with us this morning, for sharing your wisdom and for sharing some of your life with us. We really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you down the road, Jason. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andy. It was a pleasure being here, and I look forward to great things from Canisius in the future.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.